So, I am a Northern Californian and I live in New England. And I've become increasingly annoyed over time because the Boston accent is one that's a very popular one for people to make fun of or to stress. And because I'm from the West Coast, I've been accused of not having an accent. So I'm going to explain that people who live in Northern California, specifically in the Bay Area, do in fact have an accent. Now, if you don't live on the West Coast or haven't spent much time there, most of what you've seen is probably centered around LA. Nearly all the TV shows and movies that we see seem to always be centered around either New York or LA. LA is completely different from Northern California. They talk different. They tend to stretch out their vowels. My impersonation would be, "Hey dude, I'm hanging out at the beach, man, and I was on the skateboard." That's kind of how they talk, and it's a little bit different. Just watch The Big Lebowski and you'll see what I mean. They also do different things like referring to the highways. Interstate 5 is known as the 5 in SoCal. Highways, whether they're state or federal highways, are generally referred to as highways. There was once a time when federal highways were referred to as routes, as in Route 50 or Route 66 or Route 40. Over time, that distinction has been lost, both in NorCal and SoCal, as far as I've been able to ascertain. Up north, Interstate 5 is I-5. Interstate 80 is I-80. Highway 99, which is a state highway, runs parallel to I-5, is Highway 99. U.S. Route 50, which runs basically parallel to I-80 from, except that it doesn't end in New York like I-80, it actually ends in Ocean City, Maryland, is also Highway 50. So that distinction again has been lost over time. NorCal, generally vowels are hard or soft, and we have things that are known as the cot-cot merger and such, which I'll explain in a minute. When we talk fast, S's and Z's tend to sound the same, and so do T's and D's, and you can tell by my voice that I'm nasal, and that's pretty common. So I'll give you some examples. Cow and cow. One's an animal, one's short for Calvin or California. Towels and towels. Towels is a town in New Mexico. The other you take to the beach. Clothes and clothes. I wear clothes and I close doors. Where and where. And then there's where and where. And there, and there are exactly the same way. Right on. When we say the words individually, we tend to pronounce the T, but if I say right on, it sounds like right on. Other examples where we can't really tell a difference and you have to rely entirely on the context to understand which word is which word. Cot and cot, daughter and daughter. Cow, cow, tow, tow. How, as in short for Harold. And how, like how are you. Meat and meat. Mary, Mary and Mary. Berry, as in the name berry, as in the things you eat. R and R. Sometimes we do actually pronounce R as our, but again, when we talk fast, it tends to vanish. And then walk and walk, like the thing you're cooking and the thing you take. Milk, we're getting a little bit better about this, but some of the older folks tend to pronounce it as milk. Creek, we're getting a little bit better about that, but some of the older folks call them cricks. Depending on where you live, it's crayfish or crawfish. Out west, we only call them one thing, and that's crawdads. Those nuts that you make pies with, those are pecans. That nice orangish fruit that's really sweet and is often sold in dried form is apricot, not apricot. Caramel, I know that's kind of a losing battle because all the commercials and all the stuff on TV, it's pronounced caramel, but it's caramel. Not to be confused with Carmel, which is that town down in Southern California that's by the ocean where all the rich people live. Sherbet. not sherbet. Now, in words that have over time been kind of Easternfied, or I'm making up words now as I go, but example, when Kennedy gave his speech about the space program and going to the moon, he promised to get us to the moon before the decade was out. Out west, it's decade. Same in details is details. Department instead of department. Okay. And then, as I mentioned before, when we say words fast, sometimes the distinction between certain hard consonants goes away. So, for example, I grew up eating fig Newtons and gravity and as in we're tourist. Now on the East Coast, it's been highly stressed on this whole wicked pissa thing that people around here say. We have our own versions out west. Hella is kind of like wicked. We used to say things like dope or tight, which would have been equivalent roughly to the pisser part. And then we do have a bad habit, like the rest of the country, of adding X's to the word espresso, so it's espresso. City names, okay, just like out in New England, half the towns aren't pronounced the way they're spelled because they're British names. We've kind of done the same thing over time in our towns. So, especially with mispronouncing Spanish names, and to the point where they've become the de facto names of the towns or areas or landmarks. So there's Benicia, not Benicia, Benicia. Concord. Del Norte, it's a county and a town up in the extreme northern part of the state, but it's Del Norte. Lodi, it's not Lodi or Lodi, it's Lodi. Marin. Monticello, it's not, it's pronounced Monticello, although we're kind of changing that a little bit. Peabody, up in Massachusetts, there's a town called Peabody. Out west, it's pronounced Peabody. Petaluma. San Francisco is known by locals as the city. Okay. San Joaquin, San Jose, Santa Rosa, Siskiyou, Suisun, Ukiah, Vacaville, Vallejo. And that's my quick lesson on why and how people from Northern California do in fact have a distinct accent.